Welcome, dear listeners. Welcome to this very first and inaugural podcast in the Magdalene Center of Healing and Holistic Wellness. And before we really dive in, I'm going to invite you to just take a moment and to take a breath wherever you are, whether you're walking, whether you're driving, whether you're sitting at home, whether you're working. Just take a big, deep breath. I'm going to go. What's coming to my mind are the words, my, oh my. My, oh my. These were words that my little daughter, who is now not so little, used to repeat to me whenever I would strap her into her car seat. And I'd hop in the front and I'd turn the keys into the ignition. Yes, at that point, keys still turned in the ignition. And I would turn around and give her a big smile, and her little chubby cheeks would be staring right back at me. As almost if we were in unison, we'd take a deep breath and go, oh my, and she'd crack up and she would say, oh my, mama, my, oh my. I don't know about you, but I've been feeling a lot of my, oh my's lately, a lot of my, oh my's, and I'd have to return to that same giggle and the same deep breath that I would take, and I'd see her little face reminding me that everything is okay. Everything is exactly right. Even though everything around me felt like it was falling apart, her little eyes and the purity and the innocence and the joy that she held when she whispered, my, oh my, was everything that I needed. And I'm here to offer that to you today. You may be saying, my, oh my, but there is a part of you, a piece of you that remembers, just like Anna helped me to remember, that everything was okay, even though my whole body needed that big deep breath and the words, my, oh my. My name is Tammy Babinchak. I'm your host, and this is Magdalene Unveiled, Transforming Shadow with Grace. And we're here to talk about how we continually reorient to that place of innocence, to that place of trust, where the world reflects back to us the power that exists within us of trusting that there is something greater that is always at play. Love, trust, surrender to the force that is not only the equal and opposite opposing force of chaos, not only the force that holds the center, but that just is. It's the only thing that's real, and it's the thing that we must reorient to. In the Gospel of Mary, it's called out as the good. We transform our shadow with grace to return to the good. I don't know what each and every episode is going to offer. I don't know what I'll be here to say, because I can't. I just show up and I let the words flow through me. But today, our episode is about hope. Stick around. Hope. Hope is a word that we have to understand exists simultaneously with hopelessness. That is the work here in the Magdalene Unveiled, is understanding that no matter what we are experiencing, there is always an equal and opposite opposing force that exists at the same time. The question is being in the center of both of those opposing forces. This is what we refer to here as holding the center. Even in those moments of intense joy and happiness, on the other side of that is immense suffering and desolation. Even though we may not be experiencing it at the same time, it exists simultaneously. The center is knowing that they both exist simultaneously and an awareness that we are only experiencing that one aspect of both. But yet we contain both. We're capable of both. And frankly, that's in its simplicity. We are multidimensional beings who are capable of experiencing many things simultaneously. In fact, I challenge you to think of a moment right now where you might have woke up in the morning and just began your day, and perhaps you experienced tremendous frustration, right? Or maybe just anxiety or unknowing. And yet somewhere within that same day, you may have seen or felt joy or a flicker of happiness or hope that somehow just showed itself up. Maybe you didn't because you weren't looking for it, but I promise you, if you chose to try to find the way to reorient to the center, you would remember that there is always both. Hope requires a remembering that it is something we can choose, and that we have to choose over and over and over. And in the world today, especially right now, where it seems like everything is there's just, right, there's so much uncertainty, there's so much fear, there's upheaval, there's chaos. It feels like chaos, it feels like overwhelm. And all of those things ultimately lead to feeling fear, which ultimately leads to feeling anxiety, which ultimately unearths something else. And depending on where you are, depending on how aware you are of your own shadow, it manifests itself in our lives in many, many different ways. That anger can be transformed into violence, can be transformed into a different kind of hate. It's ultimately transformed into a level of consciousness that is so far away from the center that it feels like darkness. It's almost like a sterile void of feeling nothingness. We begin to feel nothing. And when we even inch toward feeling the thing that we are afraid of really feeling, we run back because we'd rather be numb. How much of that is happening in the world today? How many of us today are running away from the very, very things we need to feel? And then we have those who are on the other side of the spectrum. Right? Those who are the light workers of light, those who only see the light, who love the idea of spiritual bypassing, even though they may not even intentionally be doing it or be aware that they're doing it. They're just on the other side. They're on this idea of, right, they live and can only thrive in this other realm, this other place where there's only light and love and goodness, and that's all we want to, need to, should be focusing on. And what we're essentially doing is missing the very thing that is allowing us to transform into the place where we hold both simultaneously. That is what we're here to do at Magdalene Unveiled. We're here to learn how to transform the thing we need to feel, the thing we need to experience, into a grace that reminds us how to reorient to the center. And when we do this, we reconnect to a frequency of vibration that allows the world to reflect back to us, the center, despite what is happening around us. Friends, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is not something you just wake up one morning and decide you are going to do. This is lifelong work, but I promise you, you can get really good at it. It's like anything. It's kind of like, if you want to run. So I was a runner my whole life. I ran half marathons. I ran triathlons. I was a runner in high school. I loved running. Running, for me, was my outlet. It was my outlet for everything. If I had a bad day, I could run it out. It was in that running where I might be blasting music and I might be pushing myself to my heart was beating out of my chest and my lungs felt like I would dry clean them. But it didn't matter. That was my outlet, right? Of being able to actually process whatever it was I needed to process, to feel whatever it was I needed to feel. And the only way you get really good at running is that you keep doing it and you practice it, right? And it's baby steps. In the beginning, I might have, I remember I would just start off with like, maybe I'm just going to go out and I'm going to walk run. And then I would all of a sudden find myself running a little bit longer. And then all of a sudden I found myself that I could run a mile. And then I found, holy shit, I can actually run 2 miles through it. You get the idea, right? It's like anything. The more you do it, the more you practice, the better you get. And then as you begin to get it, you say, wow, something's happening. Something is transforming here. Something's changing. I feel better. I look better. But more than anything, my head was better. Right? I wasn't in a place where I was coming home from school or going to school. And now I can articulate. I wasn't projecting all of the things that I wasn't able to process onto everybody else. But if you aren't doing the work, outside of the metaphor of running, if you aren't doing the work or finding the thing that processes the things you need to process, if you aren't able to get beneath, feel the things you need to feel, and whether you walk around pretending that everything is all rainbows and sunshine and great gloriness, is that even a word? You aren't feeling happy all the time. The minute you move from the happiness, you've got to, right? You're working so hard to find your way back, but it's empty. Just like the people who live in this sterile void. The people who are in this level of consciousness where everything is just falling apart. And so the only way to not feel the falling apartness is that we numb, because we're already numb. Can you venture from your place of knowing what you think you know, of knowing what you think should be true, of defending what you think you know to be true, and instead, begin to get curious? Can you begin to question that maybe what you think you know, you don't know? Or that you might be wrong? Let me tell you, I can only say this and speak to this because I was the person who my husband and people around me would say, well, Tammy, you don't know everything. But I was a righteous Catholic who knew how to get to heaven. I knew the way. I knew what it meant to be good. I knew what it meant to be a good Catholic. I knew what it meant to be pure. I knew what it meant to follow the rules. I knew what it meant to, and I practiced this, by the way. I practiced all these things. And so because I practiced them and because I believed them, what I did is I walked around in righteousness with an opinion that I believed was true. I believed I was right. I believed I knew the way. And now I can tell you that not only is that what is known as a knowing, a false knowing, a false wisdom, a false sense of self, with a capital S. It was experiencing all those things that finally drove me to a place where my knowing undid me. That's where it begins. That's where it begins. And so for those of you who are listening to this right now, who think you know, who think you're right, perhaps there's been a trigger for you. Perhaps you're listening because there's a part of you who has reached the breaking point and is tired of knowing. I was tired of knowing. I was tired of having to have all the answers because the more that I tried to produce those answers, the more that I realized I didn't know. And the more that the grace that I'm speaking of, the grace that transforms shadow, again, I could never have articulated this before, but the grace that transforms shadow, the love that I know now in a completely different way, that love triggered me so much and brought me to a place of such immense and intense surrender that I was pissed. I was so freaking pissed. I was mad at everything. The world began to reflect back to me the sterile void. Because I went from the light, right? I went from knowing the light. I went from thinking I had it all figured out. And so I was living in this place of success and knowing, and I knew what it was like to survive. And I knew what it was like to be able to not only survive, but to be quote unquote successful in the eyes of society and of the world. I went from a shitty childhood, from having very difficult parents who I had a very strained relationship with, from having to find my way from college forward to having to essentially mother my mother to take care of both of my parents in my own way, to be able to find my way through college, support myself both spiritually, emotionally, and financially. And finally, right, I made it. All of the things that I dreamed of having, I had, and I knew it. I knew how to get there. And so I had the story I believe that I could tell that ultimately allowed me to be where I was. And so I was in this place of knowing. But yet, there was something. There was a core part of me that was empty. Because I kept searching for the thing that was going to give me the kind of fulfillment that my soul knew I was needing, knew I was really seeking. But yet I was so convinced by the ways of the world that there was something more out there that was going to define me. I had all these identities. The wife, the mother, a successful pharmacist, a pharmaceutical, medical affairs executive. All those things defined me, and I'm going to tell you right now that they were empty. And this is important for me to really briefly expand upon. They served me in every way. I needed to do all of those things. I needed to survive. I needed to attain this idea of success for myself. It's part of my path. It was part of the path. I needed to do it. The part of my ego, the development of my ego, enabled me to achieve what I achieved. And I'm deeply and utterly grateful for it. And although I call those things of success empty, they served my path in every way. And so I am deeply, deeply grateful for them. And I would never in any moment say that I wish it was different, because I don't, because it was not only exactly right, but it got me to the point of being able to see that there was a part of me now, having achieved those ideas that I had of what was successful, of being able to label myself as something, that I was then able to feel into the fact that they weren't enough. And that what I was actually seeking was something much greater. But I didn't understand where it was. Because there I was, right? I was here. I got to the place that I wanted to get to, but now what? You see, and then begins the path, a different path. I was met with immense, what I now call triggers. Triggers for me were just these moments of a different kind of awareness. A different kind of awareness where this was only going to take me, the thing I thought I was seeking or chasing, frankly, chasing is the word. The thing I was chasing was only going to take me to a place where I was just going to be chasing the next thing. And it was this ongoing chase, and frankly, it was freaking exhausting. I was just tired. I was tired of the chase, and I kept finding that the more I got, the more exhausted, right, that I felt I was, and the more angry I was, and the more frustrated I was, and the more empty I was. I know, right? It just wasn't making sense. And so I'd lay in bed and my mind would be racing and racing and racing about how it could be that all these things existed. But let's go back to the very beginning of what we're talking about here. The very beginning of this, which is that understanding that both exist at the same time. That in this moment of my own revelation of success, there was this part of me that was desperate for love, desperate to understand the hopelessness that existed within me at the same time, that was desperate to remember and to call forward the traumas that helped to build the very thing within me that enabled me to sustain and to endure, to have the fortitude to get to what I had to get through to get to what I got, right? I had to come face to face with the fact that the more I was seeking was deeper, and it wasn't pleasant. It was in this other place, and it wasn't the void of numbness, because actually it was easy to go there too. You know, it was easy to, when you started to know or remember, or right, this knowing, remembering that I'm referring to is this thing like, shit, I gotta go into this place I don't want to go to within myself. And it was easy to numb that feeling because you could just go out into the world and seek the next thing, and you got these moments of temporary pleasure. Travel, friends, a couple drinks, and it all kind of evened itself back out, right? And you woke up the next morning, and I went out, and whether I was catching a plane, or whether I was going to work, whether I was calling into a meeting where I was the executive, my core was irritated. I was annoyed. I was frustrated. There was this growl. And that growl, that anger, that irritation just would not let up. And this, by the way, didn't let up no matter how many times I went to church, no matter how many times I went to confession, no matter how many times I went to communion, no matter how many times I went wherever I was going, whatever I was trying to do, no matter how many prayers I prayed, no matter how many rosaries, the type of rote rosary I used to pray. It didn't matter. I will say it kept me going. It kept me going. But it didn't really do much for me. I found myself out in the world feeling the same kind of growl. And finally, I got to the point where instead of the temporary numbing, the temporary pleasures of the world, they got really old, really freaking fast. And the sooner that they kept, the temporary pleasure began to go away was the minute that I began to realize. It was like that oh shit moment. It was like a come to Jesus with yourself, like, okay, wow, there is a whole next level that I gotta go to. And I remember this moment of being actually in church, and it was after communion, and I was filled with this immense feeling of God, which, by the way, I had always experienced. I've always had this knowing, this experience with God, which is why it was so contradictory to me in church, because in church I was taught there was always this intermediary. But for me, there was always this experience with God, right? And so it was after communion, I remember having this moment, and somehow in my mind, the voice that I heard was this voice saying, I can't do this alone. I need you. And I don't even know, I know for a fact that in hearing myself say that, I didn't even understand what it meant to say, I can't do this. I didn't know what this was. I didn't. But now in reflection, I could look back and articulate and say, this was, I gotta go to the thing that I know I gotta go see. I gotta feel the thing I don't want to feel. I gotta face the thing that's calling me. And that thing that's calling me was in this dark, dark cave within me that I had effectively, that's not even the right word here. I had masterfully, like freaking ninja level, locked up so freaking tight inside of my heart. I had to make sure that there were 150 million locks. There was like no one was breaking that code. Because within that place, within that dark cave within me, was a power, a love that was so immense, and that was so powerful that it scared the living shit out of me. All the things I'd pushed away, traumas, spiritual experiences, not knowing what they would mean for me, terrified me, and I needed to make sure they were locked up tight. It was in that moment that I knew I needed to also, I was being called from something that I can never be able to articulate to you. A power, a voice. It's not even a voice. It's an ineffable essence that was calling to me to face what I needed to face. And that began my journey to this very moment right here on this microphone right now, recording this podcast. The journey to self. This journey is lifelong. This journey is an immense undertaking. This journey is harrowing. This journey of transformation into who you are to become. This journey to to allowing the seed that was planted deep within you to receive the light it needs to sprout is one of the most important journeys you will ever take for the rest of your life. It's the only journey, frankly. It's the only journey. It comes at high cost, but it comes at a reward. It comes with a reward that is the only thing that you are truly seeking. You don't have to believe me right now. But if you stick around, if you stick with your path, you'll find out that that's exactly right. There's so much we have to uncover, so much we have to talk through in this journey. This podcast is as much for me as it is for those of you who would choose to listen, who are called to listen here. But I believe it is this very work that is the only work that I'm going to walk that back. There's all kinds of brilliant people creating incredible work, telling you about incredible aspects of work that we all need. But I believe that this work of self, this work of walking what I call the way of the Magdalene, especially in the world today where the name Jesus, to me, and how it is being called out is pure blasphemy. I'm just going to say it flat out. In fact, so much so that you'll hear me refer to Jesus on this podcast when he comes in and comes up as Yeshua, because I believe we need a full and utter differentiation from Jesus to the Yeshua, which is simply his name in Hebrew. The Hebrew name that he was called when he walked the earth, very likely. The gentle tenderness that his mother, that the Magdalene likely called him, and referring to him as Yeshu. We need to understand that this path of the Magdalene, the one that he, Yeshua, taught the Magdalene to master. He essentially enabled her to master it by healing her the way he did. It's documented. This is one of the things, whether we're not going to talk about much, we're not going to argue theology here. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not a theologian. So yeah, that's not what we're going to do here. But I will say this much, is that I do know, and I think it's all fair for us to say, even those of you who may be listening who know theology, it's fair enough for us to say that we know, and it's pretty well documented, that Mary was healed of the 7 demons. Mary became the Magdalene, the tower of faith, through this healing. and she walked and mastered the way. It was what enabled her to stand beneath the cross with Mary, Yeshua's mother, and John the Apostle. It is this way, the way of Yeshua, the truth, the life. This path to self and true transformation in the inner world that allows the outer world to mirror itself. The metaphysical aspects of this work that actually allow that our consciousness, awareness of our consciousness, awareness of our unconsciousness, the integration of the both of them, of holding the opposites, allows us to have the world reflect back to us a different world. That's what we're here to do. It's what I practice. It's what I teach others to do, although the teaching, quote unquote, is simply a guiding to your own path because each of us have an individual path. There's been a very unique, special seed that has been planted within your own heart. The path to sprouting that seed is similar. The shadow and unearthing the light to reach that seed in order for it to flourish is unique to each and every one of us. The path is the same. I look forward to all of the upcoming moments of discussion and sharing that comes forth from my heart in my own journey, and maybe in some way hearing about yours. There's so much for us to do, so much for us to talk about. I hope that you'll join us if you haven't already. There's an incredible community around this work being built. It's being built in a platform called Mighty Networks. My center, the center where we're doing all of this fantastic work and walking the way, learning to walk the way together, is called the Magdalene Center for Healing and Holistic Wellness. Again, my name is Tammy Babinchak. I'm the spiritual director of that center. Join us on Mighty Networks. The link is listed below. There is so much happening in that space that will be a continuation of what we talk about here on the podcast. We have free webinars. We're going to have an actual cohort of an opportunity to actually learn this more, to dig deeper into the way of the Magdalene. But there's a ton of free stuff. There's so much happening and will be happening for us at the Magdalene Center. I hope you will join us. Please click below, check it out, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thanks for being here.